Hello and welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we're going to talk about perhaps a topic that is more famous than most people, is extremely popular for most people, and that is relationships. We've grown up in a world where relationships have become, for many of us, the most important thing in our lives, along with our careers perhaps. But relationships have been the backbone of society for thousands of years, ever since there was society. And the way we do it now is very different than the way they did it in the past. If the way we do it now is based upon romance, is based on attraction, is based on various myths like the soulmate myth, that there's some one person out there for you and this is the ideal person, and that you need to find this person. And if you don't, my gosh, and if you have them and then you lose them, oh my goodness, now what happens, right? It really puts up an atmosphere of scarcity, and an idealism that romance has created is that we have to find this ideal person. But what is an ideal person? And how do you know? Right? Is an ideal person someone who has a certain height or a certain amount of money or a certain kind of body? Is an ideal person someone who has a certain kind of intellect? How do you understand what's an ideal person? Is it just someone who's going to give you a certain lifestyle? Is that what success is? Is that what the ultimate partner would be? The reality is that people who have even these so-called ideal partners often and gradually find out that it's not quite all that it was cut out to be. So you see that the rate of divorce now has gone up to almost 60%. This was never the case. If you'd go back 100 years, 200 years, marriage was never based on these ideas. Romance is a very recent thing. It was based upon an arrangement that was often economic, it was often cultural, maybe even religious. And we're talking Europe, we're talking America, we're talking India, we're talking China, we're talking almost every country in the world. Now, some countries still have these things going on, and others who have moved away from that way of thinking look down upon it. And, well, the fact of the matter is those relationships in those traditional cultures often last a lot longer than the relationships we have in the Western culture. And that influence, which is now being felt even in the East, as in countries like India and China and Singapore and everywhere else, they try to copy the West with the same tragic results. So where's the answer? Where do we go? What do we look at? Today we're going to look at the Vedas. We're going to look at what they did in ancient times, well before the times we've just talked about so far. In those ancient times, in ancient India, the goal of a relationship was not about, as they called it, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. It was not just about making money. It was just not about enjoying our senses. But it was about dharma. Dharma meaning to live a life that was based on spirituality, and the goal of which was moksha, liberation from the cycle of birth and death, freedom from suffering. Those were the high, lofty goals. They also had an even higher goal than that, and that was to develop love of God. So with all that in mind, that's what a partnership or a relationship was all about. I'm not saying everybody did that, but that's what those who were more evolved in society did. That's what was looked up to. That's what was considered the epitome of a relationship. And that was what was most aspired for. So if you were the daughter or son of somebody who was very wealthy, you would look for somebody who would be the ideal partner for your spiritual path. Now, the reality that we're dealing with is very, very different. And to examine this kind of relationship, we're going to take a dive into the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a lot to be revealed out here. We're going to see the relationship today of Devahuti, who is a princess. And we're going to see the relationship of her later husband, Kardama Muni. And Kardama and Devahuti, their relationship is like a fairy tale. You'll be quite amazed to see how a great yogi gets married and what kind of relationship he creates and how that can be an example for all of us. So I think there's a lot to understand. And one more thing. The look out for this, because you'll see how men in that culture were the more focused on their spiritual growth. And because they were so much focused on their spiritual growth, they developed powers, inner powers, powers of manifestation, powers of being, powers that even kings looked up to. Kings and emperors sought out people like the sage Kardama Muni to be able to marry their daughters to, because they felt that these great, highly evolved beings would bring forth into the world a high quality of progeny, of children, who would then be a great asset to the world. We'll talk more about this as we go along. But just to understand the role that men played, and we see just the opposite happening today, where we see men having backtracked on spirituality. And I'm speaking generally. Of course, there are men who aren't like that, but there are many, for the majority, if you look at it, women have taken the lead on spirituality for the largest part now. And men have taken a back seat. They've been more focused on trying to build careers initially, and then gradually, as women have also entered that field and developed their own careers and become as successful, well, men have found that they have no place. I encourage the men who watch this show to take the example of Kardama Muni and be able to watch what kind of power can be attained by spirituality, a power that great kings, that great and beautiful women seek, a power that is innate, a power that is from your being and is not based upon how many millions of dollars you have. That's not the only measure of a person's status or a person's wealth or a person's power, but rather there is a whole other way of looking at these topics and understanding them, and to understand that that is something highly desirable and evolutionary on our path. So we're going to take a look at many different things, and let's go into the Bhagavatam. Okay, so the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, we are on chapters 20 to 23. That's what we're going to cover today. There's a lot for me to cover, and I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can through it. The chapter preceding the story of Kardama Muni and Devahuti is one in which they're going back again to Brahma and the creation. It's interesting. I just thought I'd bring up a few points from there before we dive into the story. For example, there are 5 principles that are talked about: the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 5 sense organs, and the 5 working organs. Working senses. And you might say, what's all this all about? Well, the 5 gross elements you know of: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or open space. Now, these are important because these are areas that are very rich in energy. And for any of us, that when we want to recharge ourselves, we're like batteries, and we want to recharge ourselves, that's where we need to go. But we also need to understand there are 5 subtle elements: sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. And these are perceived through the 5 sense organs: eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. And then we use our 5 working senses: the speech, the hand, the feet, genitals, all of this, to be able to work with matter and with nature. So just understanding how the Vedic times, they broke down all of life into its different components and looked at how we are interacting with the world. It wasn't just about, eat, drink, and be merry. It wasn't just about, come on, let me just have a good time. Let's go party. Let's have a blast. No, there was much more to life than that, as they understood it. So it was really about studying the nature of reality, the nature of who we are and why we're here. They studied the different kinds of goodness and ignorance and passion. But I think I'm going to jump into the story, actually. I'm eager to get there. So let's jump there. That's in chapter 21. This happens as the conversation between Manu and Kardama. All right, so now we're talking about a time called Satya Yuga. Now, to present time, we live in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is considered the age of darkness, or the age of quarrel, hypocrisy, dissension. But in Satya Yuga, it is just the opposite. Like at the end of Kali Yuga, the cycle starts again, and you have Satya Yuga, the golden age. And that is a time that is predicted in which there is peace and there is harmony, and people live together with the intention of a spiritual life, and that is the primary goal, unlike today where the primary goal is how can I get as much money as possible, how can I have as much fame as possible, and how can I develop the external world as much as possible. That is to say, technology and industry and all of that, that's all about the external world. It has nothing to do with the internal world. This inner technology is what is developed in Satya Yuga, the golden age. So in Satya Yuga, Kardama Muni, Kardama, I'm going to show you pictures and stuff as we go along. Kardama Muni, Muni means he's a sage, a highly evolved being. He practiced penance and meditation for 10,000 years on the banks of the Saraswati River. Now you say, oh my God, this is impossible. You're just making up some stupid story. But no, the fact of the matter is people in Satya Yuga live a very different lifespan. Because everything is cleaner. You don't have billions of people on the planet. You don't have polluted rivers. You don't have polluted air. You don't have the kind of, human contamination that has been created in the times we live in. And we may think that we have great technologies and medicine and so on, but they had their technologies and medicine. And also in that time, people lived longer lifetimes for many reasons. It's not just environmental. It's also the way the yugas are set up, the different ages. Now, during that time, when Kardama Muni is in his meditations, Vishnu, the Supreme Godhead, revealed himself after all that meditation that the great sage was doing. And so Vishnu, the Supreme Godhead, revealed himself to Kardama Muni in his eternal form, Vishnu's eternal form, which is free from material contamination and effulgent like the sun. He was clad in spotless yellow silk, wearing a garland of white lotuses and water lilies. His lotus face was fringed with slick, dark locks of curly hair. Adorned with a crown and earrings, he held his characteristic conch, disc, and mace in 3 of his hands and a white lily in the 4th. He glanced about in a happy, smiling mood, the sight of which captivates the heart of all devotees. Now keep in mind, Vishnu, when we're talking about, is the Supreme Godhead, according to the Vedic philosophy Sanathan Dharma, which is now plagiarized into being called Hinduism, but we don't like to use that term as much. But anyways, Vishnu is considered the supreme being. Yes, beyond Vishnu is Krishna, but Vishnu is kind of like the one that many of the yogis come across in their meditations. And then it goes on to describe again, he had a golden streak on his chest, and the famous Kaustubh gem was suspended there on his neck. And he stood in the air with his lotus feet placed on the shoulders of his carrier, the bird Garuda. Now I'm going to show you a picture of that. And so that's what we're looking at. That is Vishnu standing up on the left side, and Garuda is the bird carrier, and that's Kardama Muni sitting at the bottom under the tree. Okay, beautiful scene along the river Saraswati, and that's his place of meditation. Kardama, the great sage Kardama Muni, fell on the ground with his head bowed to offer obeisance. His heart naturally full of love of God, with folded hands he satisfied the Lord with prayers. O supreme worshipful Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled. Means being able to see. This is the highest pinnacle of my sight. This is the greatest sight I have ever endured. For a person who has been totally focused inward, now this is the fulfillment of seeing, is to see God. My power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of sight, the sight of you, who are the reservoir of all existence. Through many successive births of deep meditation, advanced yogis aspire to see your transcendental form. All conditioned souls, as if bound by rope, are constantly engaged in satisfying their desires. By drinking the intoxicating nectar of your qualities and activities in discussions with one another, we can be freed from the primary necessities of the material body. So you see here, we're all engaged in fulfilling our desires, whether those be desires for survival or desires for success or desires for having the things we want or the people we want, right? But he says the idea is not to be chasing our desires, but rather to become free of them. And how do you become free of your desires? By the intoxicating nectar of the qualities and activities and discussions about God. How you basically, what happens is that when you are engaged in such discussions, when you are engaged in such dialogue, you find yourself being uplifted into another world. You find yourself transported, transcendent into another realm. Even as you listen to these stories, if you deeply dive into them and try to understand them, you'll find yourself going out of your head and really starting to listen from a deeper place, the place of the soul. Because the soul, when it hears these things, it wakes up. It's never heard this stuff. It's not on TV. It's not on the radio. It's not in the magazines. It's nowhere to be found. When the soul finds something soulful, when it finds its energy, its vibration, it wakes up. Just as a dog who's sleeping, when it smells food, goes, oh, where is that food? So in much the same way, when the soul, which was dormant, hears the pastimes of God, the name of God, hears something that is truly from the soul level. I don't mean from the head, some preacher trying to fill you in with some nonsense and trying to tell you why you should be guilty and how you're wrong. No, that is not going to appeal to the soul. But when it hears about the glories of God, the beauty and the incredible nature of the divine, then it wakes up and it says, oh, tell me more about that. When it hears his name and the chanting, it wants to know more. It wants to dive in deeper. So that is what was happening here. Kardama Muni is talking about this. He says that by drinking the intoxicating nectar of your qualities and activities in discussions with one another, we can be freed from the primary necessities of the material body. You are eternal time. It's so interesting, right? God is eternal time, and when we are in the presence of God, either by hearing or chanting or remembering, we find ourselves in a timeless world. We are in eternal time, right? So his pastimes and activities and this information is actually an invitation to walk into eternal time, to lose track of time. And then, of course, you start remembering the things of the world and you're back in time. Right, but we are, and time cages us, entraps us. That's how the world works. But we want to become free from time. We want to enter into that timeless realm again and again and again. So that's why I keep these videos on, on YouTube, so you can hear them again and again. So you can keep on nourishing yourself, and you can keep on uplifting yourself and finding that space of eternal time. So he continues, you are eternal time. Through its revolution, time cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation. However, this wheel of time, of tremendous velocity, cannot touch the lifespan of your devotee. So the devotee of Krishna or Vishnu, by hearing about him, transcends time and experiences feeling eternally youthful, regardless of how old they might be. It has no consequence on their feeling, because their soul is awake, and for the soul there is no age, there is no old age, there is no death, there is only timelessness. And as long as you can keep on doing things that awaken your soul, you'll keep experiencing this. Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, that bird carrier of his, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. He said, having come to know what was in your mind, I have already arranged for that, for which you have worshipped me. For those who worship me with devotion, there is never any question of frustration. In other words, Vishnu had already read his mind, known his heart's desire, and already dealt with it. It's already arranged. It's not like we have to go to God and say, God, give me this and give me that, and, please, I beg of you. No, he already knows your desire. And if you're not getting your desire right now, it's probably not a good time. Trust that. right? And when there is a good time, you'll get it without even having to ask, because he knows what is best for you. He trusts that. It's really at the heart of it, learning to trust God, that his wisdom is greater than ours, that his understanding is more clear and more powerful and more beautiful than our own. And so when we may have desires, but as the saying goes, what is it? Man proposes, God disposes, right? So letting go our desires, surrendering them to God, and being able to say, if you so wish, if that is in my best interest, so let it be. But here we see he goes one step further. He's already read the mind of Kardama and is telling him what's going to happen. He says, Emperor Swayambhuva Manu, the emperor of the earth at that time, the son of Lord Brahma, who rules over the earth with its 7 oceans. They knew there were 7 oceans back then, thousands of years ago. Will come here with his wife, wishing to see you. He has a grown daughter who is ready for marriage. She is just the type you've been thinking of in your heart for all these long years. Now, this is so interesting to learn that, you know how most people, they are looking to find the right person, the right mate. And you go on your dating apps and you go into all these things to try to find the right person. And it's really hard, right? And so often you end up with compromises. So often you end up not quite meeting the right person. But here we have Kardama Muni, where Vishnu has already arranged the perfect mate for him. He knows exactly the state of evolution of this great yogi, this rishi, this muni. And he has found for him exactly the person who is going to be perfectly and ideally suited. Imagine if we could do that, if we could trust in God to find us the right partner. And then know that it will be done, that we will be brought together, that we surrender and allow for this to happen, and we trust. It's a whole different way of looking at things. It doesn't mean you don't take any action. It doesn't mean you don't do anything, but it simply means that you trust in that this shall be so. So Vishnu continues, she is just the type you have been thinking of in your heart and for all these long years. She will soon be yours and will serve you to her heart's content and bring forth 9 daughters. Your son Kapila will be my incarnation to teach the Sankhya philosophy. With your heart cleansed, resigning to me the fruits of your acts, you will finally attain to me. That is, after all the children are born. By showing compassion to all living entities, you will attain self-realization and perceive your own self as well as all the universes in me and myself in you. So Vishnu's actually shown him exactly what's going to happen from here on. Then he departed for Vaikuntha on Garuda. The next day, the monarch of the entire earth, Swayambhuva Manu, his wife and daughter, came to see the sage Kardama, who was radiant in his energy. Now you see, the sage had been spending years and years in meditation. He had actually become quite emaciated and fragile and wasn't looking his best at all. He hadn't showered, he hadn't done nothing in a long time. But the presence of Vishnu had revived his energy, revived his appearance, had brought out his beauty. He was tall, the sage was tall, his eyes were large like lotus petals with matted locks, and he was wearing rags. The king, and watch this now, the king bowed and touched his head to the sage's feet. This is the etiquette of that time. The sage, the sadhu, the rishi, the highly evolved being, was worshipped by even the king, by even the emperor of the world. They came to the sages to take guidance. They honored them as the highest form of living being. And that's what you see here now. The sage then seated the king and greeted him with benediction, blessed him, and received him with due honor. He then asked for the purpose the king had come to see him. That was, of course, a matter of etiquette because he already knew why the king had come. Right? So, the king said, the moment my daughter heard from the sage Narad Now you see, the sage Narad had been to the king's house. He'd already kind of like starting to get the ball into motion, and had already come to the king's house and had already spoken with the daughter. So Narad Muni is known to do this, to travel here and there to kind of make things happen. So the moment the daughter Devahuti had heard from the sage Narad of your noble character, learning, beautiful appearance, youth, and other virtues, she fixed her mind upon you. Therefore, please accept her, for she is in every respect fit to be your wife. O wise man, I heard that you were prepared to marry. Please accept her hand, which is being offered to you by me, since you have not taken a vow of perpetual celibacy. So there are many sages who have taken a vow of celibacy, but in the case of Kardama Muni, he had been instructed to bring forth children into the world. The sage accepted Devahuti as his wife. The queen gave her valuable presents suitable for the occasion. So the queen mother, gave the daughter valuable presents like gold and jewelry and various other things that she would need to be able to, just as gifts, right? But these kind of things have been corrupted now and turned into like dowry, where people demand things. But no, parents like to do something for their kids when their kids get married, want to help them settle down, want to help them have a home or have a nice setting, get a good head start on life. And that's kind of the idea behind it. Of course, in this case, Devahuti was getting married to a great sage, and she wasn't going to need anything. And then Emperor Swayambhuva Manu, his mind agitated by feelings of separation, embraced his affectionate daughter with both his arms. Tears poured from his eyes again and again, drenching her head. The king and queen then departed on their chariot for their capital. Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king, and although absorbed in material activities and material pleasures, he always enjoyed his material happiness in God-conscious atmosphere, engaged in hearing, contemplating, writing down, and chanting the pastimes of Vishnu. He lived for 71 cycles of the 4 ages. Each of the 4 ages, right, the cycle of 4 ages lasts 4,320,000 years. That is Satya Yuga, which we were talking about, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Kali Yuga. All 4 of them taken together last 4.3 million years. So he lived 71 times 4.3 million years. You can do the math on that if you like. But he spent most of that time engaged in thinking about and serving Vasudeva. Here's a picture of the couple, because they're living in a forest, in a very simple lifestyle. And although she's a princess, she has now accepted the place of, the lifestyle of her husband, Kardama. Devahuti, who could understand the desires of her very powerful husband, served him constantly with great love, intimacy, respect, and sweet words. Giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, and vanity, just as Bhavani, the wife of Shiva, serves her husband. Now, there's a very important word being used here, service, seva. And it's a word that we don't quite understand in today's time. We all want to be served, but that is not the way of the Vedic time. And it's not just about the woman serving the man, it's about the couple serving each other, as you'll see. But the idea is that is how a relationship thrives. That is how a relationship prospers. That is how a relationship grows and deepens. Not by asking what's in it for me. Not by trying to get something out of the other person. Not by using the other person for either as an ATM machine or as a place from which to get your pleasures, or for the other person to be there to serve you. No. It's a place of mutual service, mutual surrender, mutual devotion to each other, where you might even say that the other person's happiness is your happiness, and your happiness is their happiness. And if you can have that kind of a loving exchange, then you have something that will become truly memorable. So if you really want to strengthen your relationship, Look at how you can serve your partner and not how you can use them. Due to her devotion over time, she grew weak and emaciated. Remember, she was with a sage. She was with a person who was very saintly and was not interested in material things at all. So she followed his path. Her husband, Kardama, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. So this is happening, some years into their marriage. He says, I am very much pleased with you for your great devotion and most excellent loving service. Since the body is so dear to embodied beings, I am astonished that you have neglected your own body to use it on my behalf. I find this statement said a lot by people. They'll say, oh, I gave so much of myself, and what did I get in return? I think you're missing the point. When you're in love with someone, you give freely. You don't sit around measuring, I gave so much of myself. Look how much I did for you. I did this and I did that and the other. You don't sit there trying to calculate and total it. Yes, I'm not saying you need to give up yourself or who you are, but you do need to adapt with each other. You do need to be able to forego certain things. Each side, each party needs to do that, not one person doing it and not the other. You do forego certain things. You do let go of certain aspects of yourself, but you do hold on to other aspects of yourself, which are perhaps core and more fundamental. So that's important to understand. This idea that, I gave up so much of myself. Well, of course you did. That's what you do in relationships. You give up parts of yourself. Hopefully not key parts. Hopefully not parts that make you feel alive and happy and joyous and celebratory about life. I hope you don't do that. But yes, there are many things you'll give up. Perhaps your freedom when you're by yourself, you give up and you give that up to be in a relationship. You give up maybe that your partner likes certain kinds of foods and you like certain kinds of food, so you adapt to each other. It's so important to be able to understand that. This is not some big sacrifice. It is the nature of being able to live together. When two people come together, they have to forego certain things that they liked and then try to find that harmony where both can get along. But again, we've forgotten these things. And now we have power struggles. And now we have people trying to one up the other, one who's going to dominate the other, whether it's the male trying to dominate the female as it was traditionally. And now we see women trying to dominate men. It doesn't go anywhere. It's such a waste of time and energy. Instead, we need an environment in our relationships that is based upon being able to serve and honor and respect and value each other. And if that means foregoing certain aspects of ourself and our likes and dislikes, what is more important? Is love more important, or is that particular thing more important? Ask yourself that. Then the husband, Kardama, said, I have achieved the blessings of Vishnu. Although you have not yet experienced these achievements, which free one from fear and lamentation, I shall offer them all to you. Now just look at them. I am giving you the transcendental vision to see how nice they are. Again, a very important point. The beauty of being in relationship is this, that when you are with a partner, truly devoted, truly committed, not only do you sometimes let go of some aspects of yourself, but you also imbibe some of their good qualities. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the real treasure. Right? We forego certain aspects of ourselves that aren't necessarily either important or helpful or good for us or for a relationship. And we imbibe certain strengths and good qualities of the other person. If one person is more tolerant and patient and kind and the other one is not, well, it becomes a learning for that other person. And if the other one is more tender and loving and affectionate and this one is not, well, then they learn from each other. And that's how you grow together, by imbibing each other's good qualities and letting go of the ones that aren't so supportive of the relationship and of yourself. So he is giving all his spiritual advancement, all the blessings that he received from Vishnu to his wife, Devahuti, and transmitting that across to her. He says to her, what is the use of enjoyment other than by His grace. All material achievements are subject to be annihilated simply by a movement of the eyebrows of Vishnu. Just by a little movement of His eyebrows, all material things are annihilated because He is the Supreme Being. He says, by your devotion you have achieved and can enjoy transcendental gifts very rarely obtained by persons proud of aristocracy and material possessions. I mean, she came from a kingly family. She had everything, right? And she let go of all of that to be with her husband and adopted his lifestyle. She could have said, no, I'm not going to be with somebody who's not at my level. I'm not going to be with someone. I'm not going to be with someone who cannot offer me the lifestyle I'm used to. But she understood, because of the Vedas, the lifestyle her husband was engaged in was far higher than that of the kings. Anyways, the story continues. There's much more to this. Devahuti was very satisfied that her husband understood where she was coming from, acknowledged where she was coming from, and understood her. Her smiling face shone with a slightly bashful glance. She spoke in a voice choked with humility and love. She requested Kardama, with his mystic powers, to restore her skinny, emaciated body to health and arrange for a house where they may conceive and bear children. The sage Kardama exercised his yogic power and instantly produced an aerial mansion, in other words, a mansion that was floating in the sky, that could travel at his will. It was a wonderful structure, bedecked with all kinds of jewels, adorned with pillars of precious stones, and capable of yielding whatever one desired. It was equipped with every form of furniture and wealth which tended to increase in the course of time. The castle was fully equipped with necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing for all seasons. In other words, it was cool when it's hot, and it's warm when it's cold. Right? A perfect temperature at all times. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees and tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. The palace looked charming, with beds, couches, fans, and seats, all separately arranged in 7 stories. Its beauty was enhanced by artistic engravings here and there on the walls. The floor was of emerald, with coral daisies. The palace was very beautiful, with its coral thresholds at the entrances and its doors bedecked with diamonds. Gold pinnacles crowned its domes of sapphire, with the choicest rubies set in diamond walls. Set in its diamond walls. It appeared as though possessed of eyes. It was furnished with wonderful canopies and greatly valuable gates of gold. You might say, oh, this is ridiculous. How is this possible? Our logical mind definitely cannot understand this idea. But here it is. Devahuti and Kardama, and the aerial mansion that he created from his yogic mystic powers. It is amazing what people were able to create with yogic powers. They didn't need factories, they didn't need thousands of workers, they didn't need to have great industrial complexes, but rather through the power of their mind and their yogic abilities, they were able to do all kinds of things, which you will keep hearing about. This was inner technology. This was the technology that lies within us, that we have the potential to do, and which we have forgotten. So let's put it up on the screen for you. Once again, I hope you're seeing it. All right. In that palace were multitudes of live swans and pigeons, as well as artificial swans and pigeons, so lifelike that the real swans rose above them again and again, thinking them live birds like themselves. Thus the palace vibrated with the sounds of these birds. The castle had pleasure grounds, resting chambers, bedrooms, and inner and outer yards designed with an eye to comfort. All this caused astonishment to the sage himself. When sage Kardama saw his wife Devahuti looking at the gigantic, opulent palace with a displeased heart, he understood her feelings and said, "My dear, you look very much afraid. First, bathe in the lake Bindu Sarovar, created by Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then let us mount this castle." Because of her dirty dress, the thick layer of dirt on her body, and the locks of matted hair on her head, Devahuti did not look very attractive. So what did she do? She followed his advice and dove into the sacred waters of the Saraswati River. Within the lake was a house with 1,000 girls in the prime of youth and fragrant like lotuses. With folded hands they said, "We are your maidservants. Tell us what we can do for you." And that's the scene. So now we are in the water. Don't ask me how. And there is 1,000 girls there ready to dress her up. They bathed Devahuti with valuable oils and ointments and then dressed her in fine, new, spotless cloth to cover her body. They then decorated her with valuable jewels and garlands. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrists and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. About her hips she wore a girdle of gold set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. They then offered her nutritious food along with sweet inebriating drink. Kardama, seeing his wife restored to her original beauty, his fondness for her grew, and he placed her on the aerial mansion. Though seemingly attached to his beloved consort, the sage did not lose his glory, which was mastery over his self. In the aerial mansion, the couple shone as charmingly as the moon in the midst of stars in the sky, which causes rows of lilies to open in ponds at night. They traveled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru. Now, this was not just flying in the air, but they was able to travel kind of like a UFO. So they traveled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru, the beautiful gardens, and the Mansarovar lake, where the cool, gentle, fragrant breezes stimulated passion. They stayed and enjoyed themselves there for many, many years. They traveled to various planets in that great and splendid aerial mansion and could fly at his will. In that aerial mansion, Devahuti, in the company of her handsome husband, situated on an excellent bed that increased sexual desires, could not realize how much time was passing. What is difficult to achieve for those who have taken refuge of the Supreme Godhead's lotus feet? And this is the point they make here. What is difficult to achieve for those who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. After showing his wife the globe of the universe and its different arrangements, full of many wonders, the great yogi Kardama Muni returned to his own hermitage. So then they came back. He then divided himself, once they were back, he divided himself into 9 personalities. Now, this is a known fact that yogis can do that. They can actually split up into different clones of themselves. Up to 9 is what's been said to be the maximum. So he divided himself into 9 personalities and impregnated Devahuti with 9 discharges of semen just to give her pleasure. Immediately afterward, on the same day, Devahuti gave birth to 9 female children. Again, no waiting around, no going through the whole period of pregnancy. The same day. Again, their measure of days is very different than ours, so I'm not quite sure how all that works. I just know that we're living in a dimension where all things are possible. We're living in a dimension where it doesn't follow the same rules that are over here and the way we live. So anyways, Devahuti gave birth to 9 female children, 9 girls, all charming in every limb and fragrant with the scent of the red lotus flower. In that way, Kardam and Devahuti enjoyed sex for many years, and 100 autumns passed like a moment. Kardam then prepared to leave home and take sannyas. Devahuti smiled externally, but at heart she was agitated and distressed. She stood and scratched the ground with her foot. She spoke in slow yet charming voice, suppressing her tears. She said to him, "You have fulfilled all the promises you gave me, yet because I am your surrendered soul, you should give me fearlessness too." So usually what would happen is in Vedic society, once the children were grown, once parents had spent time raising them, then they'd go into what's called vanaprasth. So then they'd start traveling together, go to holy places, and start becoming more and more detached from home and possessions and family and children. That was considered the third order. But the first order of life was you were a student, then you became a householder, then you started to detach yourself from your house as the vanaprasth. So van means forest. So starting to spend time in either holy places or the forest where you meditate and you start becoming detached from everything. And then final stage was sannyas. So usually around the age of 75, if you lived 100 years, when you were old, you left each other and you completely dedicated yourself and your life to God. But now in this case, the daughters are just born and Kardam is wanting to leave and take sannyas, and she's actually quite upset. As far as your daughters are concerned, she continues, Devahuti, they will find their own suitable husbands and go away to their respective homes, but who will give me solace after your departure as a sannyasi? Until now, we have simply wasted so much of our time in enjoying our senses, neglecting to cultivate knowledge of the Supreme Godhead. Not knowing your transcendental situation, I have loved you while remaining attached to the objects of the senses. Nonetheless, let the affinity I have developed for you rid me of all fear. Because see, the fear of loss is the greatest thing we have. Losing a partner can be like dying, like someone dying, and it can be painful to the greatest degree. It's like a part of you got ripped out of you. And if that person has been the sole focus of your life, it can be just utter devastation. That's what she's feeling now. So she's finding a way to get through to him. She says association or getting together for sense gratification is certainly the path of bondage. And that's what most people now do. But the same type of association performed with a saintly person leads to the path of liberation, even if performed without knowledge. I have been cheated by the insurmountable illusory energy Maya, for in spite of having obtained your association, which gives liberation from material bondage, I did not seek such liberation. So now the question remains, will Kardam stay or will he go? We're going to find out in the next episode. For now, I'm going to leave it at this because it would have become much longer if I had continued. So I had to stop over here. And in the next one, we'll find out what happens. Does he stay? Does he go? What happens next? There's a whole lot to follow. But I wonder, what did you take away? What did you learn? What did you understand from this? Well, how can you adopt some of these teachings into your life? And where do you see parallels that might inspire you in a different way of relating and a different way of understanding what relationship, the intention and purpose of relationship is? I'm going to switch over so that people can get on. If you want to talk on Zoom, we can join in. All right. And let's see if anybody would like to. Okay, we've got some questions here. Sisi, you were asking a very interesting question. Kardam divided himself into 9 personalities, and Devahuti had 9 kids. What's the significance of the number 9? I personally don't know much about that. There is definitely a science to numerology, and there is a significance to these things. I do know, the only thing I know is that yogis have, one of their mystic abilities is to be able to divide into a maximum of 9 personalities. And in this case, each of those personalities impregnated Devahuti. And she knew that. This is her husband coming in 9 different personalities. So he wanted her to have that experience. And then therefore there were 9, and therefore 9 girls, 9 children were born out of that experience. But beyond that, I don't really know. Sisi, you're also asking about Kali Yuga and how long will that last? So it is said that, so as I told you, the 4 ages are Satya Yuga, Satya, Dwapar, Treta, and Kali. Satya Yuga is the longest, then Dwapar because shorter, Treta is even shorter, and Kali Yuga is the shortest, but is also the most intense because there is the level of degradation that occurs in this time. Degradation means in terms of human values, human behavior. You'll see right now, I mean, the kind of world we've created, yeah, we think we've advanced, but what is our advancement? Our advancement, our so-called technological advancement, is built upon the exploitation of people in poorer countries. It is based upon trying to keep the rest of the world poor while a few thrive and get rich. What kind of advancement is that? That's not advancement, that's exploitation. I don't care whether you can create airplanes or atom bombs, or you can create computers or whatever else it is you create. Your advancement is not based on human progress. It is based upon human exploitation. And because it is based on that, it does not benefit everyone. It only benefits a few on top. And that too, with insane amounts of wealth, while half the world doesn't have enough food to eat. I'm sorry, this is a very degraded society by all measure. So given that, Kali Yuga is a very degraded time, morally, culturally, spiritually, economically, in every way. It is a time where people lack compassion for each other. It is a time where people lack compassion or even a semblance of compassion for animals, what to say of the planet itself, right? And they definitely don't know what is good for them, what to eat. The kind of junk we eat is just absolutely amazing and abhorrent. And the kind of things we ingest into our bodies and into our minds is just, I mean, there's no saying that we're an advanced culture, not at all. If advancement is viewed from the lens of spiritual growth, we are down here. If advancement is viewed from how you can make a few people wealthy or how you can come up with trinkets and toys that you call gadgets, great, lovely, you've made great toys. But Vedic culture's advancement was based upon advancing the human being, not stuff. Right? And advancing the human being into developing powerful human beings and exploring human potential, whether that was in like a yogi or a meditator developing their powers of manifestation or creation or anything else, or sexuality, or even a warrior like we've seen with Arjun and so on. And so many of their feats seem so incredible to us, but hey, that's the kind of stuff they were working on. If we took our so-called advancements of cell phones and TVs and so on and showed it to people of those times and told them about it, they'd say, you're nuts, there's no such thing. And similarly, we look back in those times and say, that's nuts, it's all a bunch of fairy tale and stories. But what if they had developed certain technologies? That's the part we're not willing to consider. Our logical minds don't know how to wrap themselves around it. But then go back 50 years, go back 100 years, tell people about what the kind of things we have today in our technology. They wouldn't believe you either. So yeah, The Kali Yuga is meant to last 432,000 years, and it's interesting. That's about 10% of 4,300,000 and whatever it was. Yeah, it's about 10%. And we are about 5,000 years into it. So unless there is a different measure of time that they're using in the Vedic period and what we use now, there could be. We could be having it wrong in terms of the numbers. But this is what I've heard from various gurus and from various teachers, that we're only 5,000 years into the 432,000. We got a long ways to go. So when people tell me about this is the end of the world, or that, no, we got a long ways to go, man. There's and when by the time we come to I think it's the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're on the 3rd canto now. There are massive predictions about what will happen by the end of Kali Yuga. Really details them. I think it's the 11th, not the 12th, or maybe the 12th. I'm not sure. So we are degrading, in a sense, to reset human consciousness, the cycle. Yes, you're absolutely right, Cece. We are degrading in consciousness. That's the thing to understand. A conscious being is a person who is not only empathetic but compassionate, is caring, is loving of all creatures, of all things, from the planet, from the plants and the trees, to the animals, to the humans. Right? It's not just about humans. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to love dogs, but I'm not going to care about cows. No, if you love your dogs, you love your cows. If you won't eat your dog, then don't eat cows either, or lamb, or anything else. Right? Do minimum violence in the planet. Do minimum harm. Right? You will, when you're eating a plant, you're still doing some level, but you want to take the lowest level of consciousness. And you want to even take that, and Krishna says, offer it to me with love and devotion, and I will accept it, so that the food you eat then is blessed. Cindy's got some good points here too. Long ago, during a meditation, my intent was to seek guidance during a period of absolute silence. A voice asked, "What do you want?" At first I was upset by not receiving an answer. Days later the realization came. If you don't know what you want, how do you know what to do? The heart's desire is, be it for love or otherwise, is important. So if you don't know what you want, then how do you know what to do? Good point. Thank you, Cindy, for that. Yes, it is very important to know what you want. But before you go around trying to understand what you want, ask yourself, why do you want what you want? It's good to know. Once again, let me say that again. It's good to know what you want. But we are usually focused on outcomes. We're usually focused on objects. We're focused on desires. But when you look at your desires and you look at the things you want, be sure to ask, why? Why do I want what I want? What do I think it's going to give me? Right? Is it going to make me happy? Is it going to make me feel fulfilled? Is it a basic necessity? What is it going to do? Is it going to bring beauty into my life? Okay. There are certain things that are worth it, but really know your why. Because we're too often driven by our desires. And there's, for your desires, there's so many people trying to sell you on that. There's from advertisers to product, these things, they'll put it in such a beautiful way that you'll get seduced by the idea of getting this thing, and they'll make it seem so attractive, and you'll want it, and maybe other people got it and now you want it too. But the reality is, do you really need it? Ask yourself why. Why is it that I'm seeking this thing? And if there is a strong and good enough why, then it's worth your time to get it. Okay. But there's a saying in this beautiful poem by Ghalib. He says, "Hazaron ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले." He says, I have thousands of desires, ख्वाहिशें, and on each desire, I give up a whole lot of my life to fulfill that desire. Meaning, for example, if you had to buy something that costs you $100, and if you work at $10 an hour or $20 an hour, well, that's 5 or 10 hours of your time that went into getting that $100 item. Do you see? Your time, your life energy, which cannot be replenished no matter for any amount of money, is being used to get this item, and if you're not clear about why you're getting it, and if it's just something you're going to have for a little while because it was a fancy or a fashion or a fad, and because everybody else had it, because it looked good, well, you've spent a lot of your life energy in acquiring this. I would say to you, keep your life simple. Keep it simple so that you can use more of your energy towards your spiritual growth and less of it towards stuff. Stuff is not going to help you. Stuff is not going to go with you. When you die, you leave all the stuff behind. Most of it gets old anyway, and most of it gets useless after a while. But the real thing that will go with you is your spiritual growth. That is your eternal wealth. Cultivate that. And as you cultivate that, become passionate about that, you'll find that this will elevate your consciousness. It will elevate your state of mind. It will make you less responsive to the world, less reactive to the world. And that's the symptom that you're growing. It's not about trauma and healing and all these other notions. This is utter nonsense. I mean, it has validity. I shouldn't just totally dismiss it. It has validity when you are in that. But we have made such a business out of it. And we have made such a big, like it's this big, huge thing. It is not the purpose of spirituality just to heal our traumas or just to be able to get out of our shadow. Please, these are limited objectives and they are good. But far greater than that is really learning the art of spirit. Spirit actuality is what I call spirituality. Actualizing your spirit, learning how to step into your soul and live from that place. Okay, questions. Thank you guys for your lovely questions. Is there anyone on the Zoom call that would like to come in and say something? Yes, you're right as well, Cindy. Kali Yuga is difficult. Difficult because, not because it is inherently any more difficult than any time. Being in the material world is difficult. But what makes it especially difficult is that the lack of awareness, the lack of understanding of these things, and the lack of practice, and the tremendous distractions we have that lead us away from pursuing our spiritual path. I mean, we're all guilty. I'm guilty of it too. I get distracted. I find myself being pulled in this direction or that direction. It really takes a lot of work to get steady. It takes a lot of mental focus and concentration to get really zeroed in on what we've got to do, our seva, our way of contributing to the world. That's what inspires me. And I hope for you to find yours. What inspires you on your spiritual path to become more devoted, to become more committed? What is it that actually fulfills you at the deepest level? Find your why. Find the purpose. Find your, the things that make you feel alive, make you passionate, and they link them into your spirituality. What a cool question, Cindy. Are the pastimes of the divine also based on desire? The question would be, whose desire? See, the fact of the matter is that we have all come here wanting to enjoy life, enjoy our senses, enjoy the things of the world. But we're doing it without a connection to the divine. That which created us and which created the world is the owner of everything. So everything exists for the pleasure of the owner. I go to somebody's house, let's say I go to this beautiful mansion this person has, and this big beautiful house, and I start, taking things away into my suitcase because I'm there and visiting, I'm on a holiday, I'm on a vacation. I've come for a short stay, and I start pocketing stuff that I like from their house and saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And this is here for my enjoyment, and this is there for my enjoyment. I don't care whether the owner comes along and wants to enjoy it, but I want it for me. Well, will that be acceptable? But that's kind of what we're doing. That's really what we're doing. This is not nothing out here really belongs to us, and yet we are claiming ownership over it, and we are claiming this is mine. This body is mine. These things are mine. This house is mine. These kids are mine. No, they're not. Right? Even Khalil Gibran said this beautifully. He said, your children come through you, but not from you. And the same thing applies to all the stuff we have in life. None of that really belongs to us. All of it belongs to God. So if God is the supreme owner and therefore the supreme enjoyer, then it behooves us to understand that whatever we do or whatever, it doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy. It doesn't mean you need to be, a monk and detached from everything else. No, it means you enjoy it on behalf of God. When you cook something, you cook for His pleasure. You cook and it's an offering to God, and then you enjoy that food afterwards. But you link it up. That's why yoga is called union or linking up with. And so when you link up your desires with the desire of God, like you ask, what is it you want? How can I be of service to you? How can I use this human form of life for you? What is it you want from me? Use me. The greatest way to be able to understand how to overcome desire is to be used by God. Rather than trying to use God and to get what I want, to treat God like some Santa Claus or some ATM who's going to give me whatever I want, rather to say, no, I'm here for you. I want to serve you. I want to love you. Just like Devahuti did with her husband. Then she was given it. She didn't ask for anything. She wasn't wanting, she just wanted to be able to have kids. Her husband created this great mansion for her and created this whole wonderful setup. She never even asked for it or dreamt of it. And that same thing happens with God. When Krishna sees that we want nothing, our bhakti, our devotion is nishkama. There is no desire, there is no selfish desire. Then He showers us with stuff. The one who doesn't want anything gets everything. And one who wants everything might get it, but it will never make them happy. That's the sad tragedy of it. Even though those who get everything they desire are not fulfilled by that desire. They're always wanting more and more and more and more. They're like a bottomless pit, never satisfied. No matter how many billions they have, no matter how much they get, they're never satisfied. But a great rishi, someone like Kardama, is deeply fulfilled from within. And when someone is in that state, they get everything. When Kardama desired a house for his wife, he received a palace. He didn't. He himself looked at us like, oh my God, how did this show up? My gosh. So miracles happen. So yes, are the pastimes of the divine based on desire? Yes, the desire of the divine. What does God want from us? If we can link up to that. Otherwise, we're always focused on our desire and what do I want. But if I can say what I want is what you want, then God will say what you want is what I want. We have this beautiful loop, right? And that's the most beautiful way to live your life. What I want is what you want. Try it. And you'll notice something. When I say that to God, I surrender to you. He says, I surrender to you. I want what you want. And He says, no, I want what you want. And now we have this sweet exchange in which I know that whatever it is I desire, He gives me before I can even want it. And whatever it is He desires, I want to try and do for Him to please Him. And that's a way to live. To the best of your ability, of course. And whatever ability you lack, He says, I provide. And I will make sure you'll be able to do it. Are you willing to step up? Are you willing to see what is possible? All right. Well, that will stop for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'll see you next week.